Vasco da Gama, the explorer who danced with death. That night, nobody knew that Vasco da Gama was actually sailing toward his death when he embarked on history's most dangerous voyage. Those small ships standing on the coastline seemed to carry ordinary Portuguese sailors. But the truth was much darker, because ahead of Vasco da Gama's route lay waters from which no European had ever returned alive. If it were you, would you risk losing your family, your homeland, maybe even your life? Chapter 1. The Death Route. On that cold July morning in 1497, Vasco da Gama stood on his ship's deck, staring at the Atlantic Ocean before him. That determined gleam in his eyes actually concealed a deep fear, because King Manuel's mission wasn't just go to India, it meant dance with death and come back. This is where everything changed. In the basement of his ship, hidden from his crew's sight, Vasco da Gama kept a secret map. This map contained the final notes of sailors who had tried this route before and disappeared. Every line was a warning. Storms here can swallow ships. Sea monsters were spotted in these waters. The disease here killed the entire crew. But Vasco da Gama had accepted these risks, because if he succeeded, not just he, but all of Portugal would make history. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. That morning, as he left the ship, Vasco da Gama's wife hugged him one last time and whispered in his ear, "If you don't come back, I'll follow you." These words would never leave his mind throughout the journey, because now he was fighting not just for exploration, but to reunite with the woman he loved. Chapter 2. The First Trial, Cape of Storms Tempest. On the 93rd day of the voyage, Vasco da Gama's nightmare came true. But the truly shocking thing was, as they approached the Cape of Good Hope, the weather suddenly changed. The sky turned lead-colored, and the wind became so violent that sailor Gonzalo Alvarez was swept from the deck into the sea. Vasco da Gama risked his own life by reaching over the ship's edge to save him. But this was just the beginning. The storm lasted 3 days. The ship's sails were torn, masts broke, the crew faced death. Even the most experienced sailor whispered, "We've encountered God's wrath." Wait, don't miss this detail. On the second night of the storm, Vasco da Gama's brother Paulo approached him as the ship's captain. "Brother, the crew is preparing to mutiny. They want us to turn back." Vasco da Gama's response would go down in history. "Those who fear death don't set sail. If we return to Portugal without reaching India, only our souls will die." But at that moment, nobody knew that water had started seeping into the ship's hold and their food was beginning to rot. Chapter 3. Mysterious Islands, Architecture of Survival. After surviving the storm, the scene that confronted Vasco da Gama left him amazed. You won't believe this, but before them lay mysterious islands that weren't on any map. The people on these islands didn't know how to behave when confronted with a civilization they had never seen. But Vasco da Gama took a different approach. Setting down his weapons, he went ashore with gifts. His communication with the local people was not just diplomatic, but human. Because in those moments he realized that exploration wasn't just about finding new lands, but building bridges with new cultures. The island chief Kwame had given Vasco da Gama a strange gift, a bright blue stone and warning-filled looks. "This stone will protect you, but be careful. The waters ahead are deadly. What you've seen so far is nothing." That night, Vasco da Gama looked at the blue stone in his tent and wondered, how did these local people know what lay ahead? And why were they warning him? He would learn the answer the next morning. Because Chief Kwame's son had secretly come to the ship and made markings on Vasco da Gama's map. These markings showed not just dangerous areas, but the secrets of survival. But this knowledge came with a price. Chapter 4. Blood and Spice, the India Battle. After 127 days of voyage, Vasco da Gama had finally seen the shores of India. But this joy was short-lived. This is where everything changed. When they docked at Calicut port, local Sultan Zamarin's soldiers were waiting for them. But this welcome wasn't friendly, because before Vasco da Gama's arrival, Arab merchants in the region had spread bad rumors about the Portuguese. "These white men have come to steal your lands," they had said. Vasco da Gama sensed this tension and had to make a critical decision: war or diplomacy. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. That night, a local merchant named Krishnan secretly came to Vasco da Gama's ship. "Did you really come for peace?" he asked. Vasco da Gama's sincere answer changed everything. "I only want to be a bridge between two countries. War brings no benefit to anyone." Krishnan was impressed by this answer and arranged a secret meeting with the Sultan. But during this meeting, wait, don't miss this detail. During the meeting, Sultan Zamorin made a shocking proposal to Vasco da Gama. "If you truly want peace, leave one of your men here. Let this be a sign of trust." This demand put Vasco da Gama in a difficult position, because if he really left one of his crew members, he would be risking that person's life. But if he didn't, all diplomatic efforts would be wasted. At that moment, young Paulo Gonzalez from his crew stepped forward. "Captain, I'll stay. This mission belongs to all of us." After successful trading in India, Vasco da Gama faced an even bigger challenge, returning home. But the truly shocking thing was, on the return journey, half the crew had fallen ill. Scurvy vitamin C deficiency had become a deadly epidemic on the ship. Every day, a crew member was buried at sea. Vasco da Gama's brother Paulo had also fallen sick. Lying in his bed, he looked at his brother one last time. "Vasco, you must return to Portugal and tell our story. I can stay here." These words broke Vasco da Gama's heart. But he swore he wouldn't leave his brother. You won't believe this, but in those critical moments, Vasco da Gama remembered the spices and medicinal herbs he had brought from India. He decided to try the secret recipe Krishnan had given him. This was a risky experiment that would either save his crew or kill them all. Nothing happened the first day. Paulo's fever dropped slightly on the second day. The third day, what you've seen so far is nothing. On the third day, Paulo opened his eyes and said, "I want water." This was the first sign that the disease was retreating. Within a week, most of the crew had begun to recover. But Portugal was still far away and storm season was approaching. Chapter 6. The Final Test. Sea of Death. As they approached the Azores Islands, Vasco da Gama's nightmare became real again. This is where everything changed. Before them was a sea storm of unprecedented size. The waves were higher than the ship. The wind howled like screams. This storm was far more dangerous than the one at the Cape of Good Hope. The ship's rudder broke. Sails were shredded. The crew screamed in panic. "God is punishing us," some shouted. Wait, don't miss this detail. At the storm's most violent moment, Vasco da Gama made a decision. He threw some of his most valuable treasures from India into the sea. "If we survive this storm, it won't be gold that's valuable, but our story," he said. This symbolic act both lifted the crew's morale and seemed to calm the storm. But the real miracle happened that night. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. At midnight, the storm suddenly stopped. The sky cleared, stars began to appear, and in the distance, very far away, the lights of Portugal. The crew was shouting with joy, crying, hugging each other. But Vasco da Gama stood quietly at the ship's edge, thinking about the promise he made to his wife, "I will return." Chapter 7. Heroes Return. A Legend is Born. July 8, 1499, Lisbon Harbor. But the truly shocking thing was, as Vasco da Gama's ships approached the harbor, the entire city had crowded to the shore because nobody had believed they would return. The return alive of these men who hadn't been heard from for 2 years and 2 months was a miracle. King Manuel was also waiting at the harbor. But when Vasco da Gama disembarked, the first thing he did was fall to his knees and run to his wife. Those who witnessed that embrace didn't know they were watching one of history's greatest love stories. You won't believe this, but King Manuel gave Vasco da Gama the title Admiral of India. But this wasn't the real reward. The real reward was that the trade route Vasco da Gama opened made Portugal one of the world's richest countries. The spices, silks, precious stones he brought back provided not just material but cultural wealth. Everything from Portuguese cuisine to architecture would change. What you've seen so far is nothing, but Vasco da Gama's real legacy was something else. He had taught humanity the lesson that nothing is impossible. His courage would inspire future generations of explorers. Christopher Columbus had discovered America, but Vasco da Gama had opened the sea route to the east. These two discoveries had completely changed world history. Chapter 8. The Mysterious End of the Legend. Years after Vasco da Gama's death, the son of that young merchant Krishnan in India found something. This is where everything changed. In his father's chest, there was a secret letter Vasco da Gama had written to him. This letter had never been opened. It hid a shocking truth inside. My dear friend Krishnan, there's a truth I never told you. Before I embarked on this voyage, a fortune teller told me you will die on this journey, but your name will become immortal. I didn't believe this prophecy, but now I understand. Death is only the end of the body, but stories live forever. Wait, don't miss this detail. There was an even more surprising detail in the letter. Vasco da Gama had thrown a diary into the sea during the return voyage. This diary contained his most personal thoughts, fears, love, and dreams. If someone ever finds this diary, let them understand that I wasn't just an explorer, but first and foremost a human being. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. In 2019, a fisherman off the coast of Mozambique found an old chest in his nets. Inside was a 520-year-old diary. On the cover was written Vasco da Gama, personal notes. This diary showed his true character. He wasn't just a tough sailor, but a person with a poetic soul. Love letters to his wife, paternal affection for his crew, his fears and dreams. You won't believe this, but on the last page of the diary were these lines. If the children of the future are reading these lines, let them know that every impossibility is actually an undiscovered opportunity. I explored oceans, you explore your own oceans. Courage is like a ship's mast. It can break in a storm, but you can erect a new one. Epilogue. Could you become a Vasco da Gama too? Vasco da Gama's story isn't just a memory confined to history books. This story is about the desire to explore within each of us and the courage to challenge the impossible. But the truly shocking thing is, today in the 21st century we have oceans to explore, artificial intelligence, space exploration, cancer treatment, environmental problems, each is its own Indian Ocean. Vasco da Gama set sail into unknown waters 500 years ago. Do you have the courage to step into unknown territories today? What you've seen so far is nothing. Maybe you'll become the Vasco da Gama of Mars in the future. Maybe you'll find the unexplored territories of medicine, technology, or art. Because every great story begins the same way. A human being decides to take the first step toward the unknown. Did you catch something from Vasco da Gama's spirit? Did you feel that spark of courage? You won't believe this, but you, reading this story, are actually standing at the beginning of your own exploration journey right now. Because every new piece of knowledge, every new experience takes you to an unknown shore. Vasco da Gama's legacy continues. Now it's your turn. Courage takes every ship with sails to the horizon, and the horizon is just a new beginning. From Vasco da Gama's final diary,